All right, let's jump right in. Today we're looking at three fascinating historical case studies that show us exactly what happens when our absolute grandest human ambitions crash headfirst into the unforgiving forces of nature and physics.
We've got a lot of ground to cover in this explainer. Section 1 is Dreams and Disasters, followed by the 1848 Gold Rush in Section 2 and Surviving the Oregon Trail in Section 3. Then we'll dig into the Titanic's fatal flaws for Section 4 and finally wrap up with the price of ambition in Section 5.
So, Section 1, Dreams and Disasters. We're starting our journey by looking at that pure, unbridled drive that just pushes humanity out into the unknown.
Here's the thing. Whether people are walking thousands of miles across a raw continent, chasing overnight wealth in uncharted territory, or engineering the largest moving object in human history, the environment always gets the final say. Nature doesn't negotiate, it just dictates.
Which leads us to a really central question as we unpack the hidden mechanics and human hardships in these historical records. What actually happens when ultimate human ambitions collide with the unforgiving forces of nature? Keep that in the back of your mind as we go.
All right, Section 2, the 1848 Gold Rush. Let's see how the discovery of gold sparked an economic frenzy that basically warped reality. Can you imagine being an East Coast reader back then? California was incredibly sparsely populated, and news took months to travel. But when the Trenton State Gazette dropped this announcement on September 16, 1848, they basically told people you could just grab a bowl, stir some dirt, and pull out 8 ounces of gold a day. I mean, it hit like a lightning bolt.
The result was absolute, utter hysteria. People literally just dropped everything they were doing. The paper reported that entire towns like San Francisco and San Jose were just ghost towns overnight. You had lawyers, doctors, priests, all out there digging in the dirt. It was a complete societal reset, all fueled by the dream of instant wealth.
But here is the harsh reality of all that ambition. With an estimated 300,000 people rushing in, inflation went completely off the rails. $500. That's what 1,000 feet of simple wooden boards cost back then. Shovels were $10. A wooden trough was $125. The folks making the real, guaranteed money, they weren't usually the prospectors. They were the ones selling the basic supplies just to survive out there.
So if people are willing to endure that kind of wild economic chaos for a dream, you kind of have to wonder, how much physical hardship are they willing to put up with to cross a hostile continent?
That brings us to Section 3, Surviving the Oregon Trail. Let's jump to 1852, which was the absolute most congested and deadly year on the trail. When you read through the first-person diaries of travelers like John Kearns and Abigail Scott, you can track this grueling, month-by-month march toward the Pacific. In May, it was all about chaotic bottlenecks trying to ferry across the Missouri River. Come June, they're hit with these massive Platte River thunderstorms and sickness. July brings exhausting mountain climbs and the deadly threat of alkali water. And by August, they're forced into these terrifying crossings over the incredibly swift Snake River.
The pioneers actually had a nickname for the absolute worst parts of this journey. They called it seeing the elephant, because the environment literally threw every fatal hazard it had at these exhausted travelers. Imagine having your tent ripped away in the dark by a violent storm that scatters your cattle, or watching your oxen die just from drinking poisoned alkali water. The diaries are full of massive wagon accidents, deep mud holes, and the sheer terror of makeshift boats sinking in deep rivers. Nature was just relentless.
This quote from Martha S. Reed really brings that boots-on-the-ground reality to life. She counted 750 graves. It shows the devastating toll that waterborne diseases, especially cholera, took on these people. Emigrants often had no choice but to drink from stagnant sloughs, and a completely healthy person could be struck down and buried in just a few hours. All those graves are a permanent reminder of the physical price they paid.
Okay, so we've seen nature conquer pioneers in wooden wagons, but what happens when we try to conquer nature using turn-of-the-century engineering? What happens when we build something so massive we actually believe it's invincible?
Section 4, the Titanic's fatal flaws. Let's strip away all the Hollywood romance for a second and look at the cold, hard material science behind the 1912 disaster.
This contrast is honestly staggering. It is human hubris, literally written in steel. The builders estimated that this 46,000-ton behemoth could stay afloat for 2 to 3 days, even in the absolute worst-case scenario. Instead, the largest moving object ever built failed in a fraction of that time, sinking in less than 3 hours and taking nearly 1,500 lives with it.
And the true culprit? It wasn't just a big gash in the side. It was a phenomenon known as brittle fracture. Modern tests on the wrecked steel showed it had really high levels of sulfur. So when the Titanic hit that iceberg at nearly 25 miles per hour in sub-freezing water, the hull didn't just bend, it shattered. Literally, like dropping a china plate on a tile floor. The metal just could not absorb the energy in those freezing conditions.
When we map out the timeline, it is terrifying how fast the physics of rushing water overwhelmed that compromised hull. At 11:40 p.m., they sideswiped the iceberg. By 2 a.m., the sheer weight of the ocean is pulling the bow down so hard that the massive propellers are lifting entirely out of the water. Just 10 minutes later, the whole ship tilts to 45 degrees, and the structural steel literally disintegrates under the stress.
It was a disaster that compounded step by step. First, those wrought iron rivets suffered brittle fracture and just popped their heads right off upon impact. Then, water starts rushing in, dragging the bow down. And then we hit step 3, a catastrophic design flaw. The watertight compartments were only closed horizontally. They didn't go all the way up. So as the ship pitched forward, the incoming water just cascaded over the tops from one room to the next. It was exactly like a tilted ice cube tray filling up.
Finally, Section 5, the price of ambition. Let's bring all these historical threads together.
The aftermath of the Titanic forced a massive reality check. We finally had to learn from our hubris, resulting in sweeping safety regulations that actually respected the ocean's power. Ships had to extend double bottoms up the sides of their hulls, and those transverse bulkheads had to be built taller. Wireless communication became mandatory, lifeboats had to match the actual headcount, and we even created an international ice patrol. We basically admitted that technology has to adapt to the environment, not the other way around.
So, the big takeaway from this entire explainer is this. Human ambition is an incredibly powerful engine. It drives us across continents and pushes us to build absolute marvels. But nature and physics, they are the unbreakable track that we are forced to ride on. You can't outbuy hyperinflation in a gold rush, you definitely can't ignore cholera on a desert trail, and you absolutely cannot cheat the freezing temperatures and impact forces of the open ocean. I'll leave you with this thought to mull over the next time someone claims a new piece of technology is completely foolproof. As we keep pushing the boundaries of modern tech and expansion, are we truly respecting the harsh realities of our environment, or are we just building the next Titanic? Thanks so much for exploring this with me. I hope it helps you see human ambition in a whole new light.